For over 6 decades, BC Ferries has been more than just a way to get from point A to point B. It's a lifeline connecting coastal communities, an essential part of the province's economy, and a symbol of British Columbia's maritime heritage. From its early beginnings with just 2 vessels to its evolution into one of the largest ferry operations in the world, BC Ferries has grown to serve millions of passengers each year. Prior to the organization of BC Ferries in 1960, travel between Vancouver Island and the mainland was carried out by private companies. When the Fraser River Gold Rush was discovered in 1858, miners from around the world converged on British Columbia. They arrived at Victoria in droves, acquiring licenses and supplies before heading for the goldfields. Several entrepreneurs saw opportunity in getting the miners to where they were headed. William Irving became a partner in the Victoria Steam Navigation Company and built 2 sternwheelers to transport miners from Victoria to New Westminster and up the Fraser River to Port Douglas and Fort Hope. William's son, John Irving, at the age of 18, took over his father's business and became every bit as successful as his father in the following decades. In 1883, John, then 29, was made general manager of the newly founded Canadian Pacific Navigation Company. It operated 17 vessels servicing 7 routes between Vancouver Island and various ports along the BC coast, including Vancouver, New Westminster, and even Alaska. In 1901, the company was purchased by the Canadian Pacific Railway, becoming the steamship division of the CPR. The Union Steamship Company, founded in 1889, was formed to provide maritime transportation services for the benefit of the 2,000 or 3,000 loggers, fishermen, farmers, and other residents of the Sunshine Coast and dozens of other smaller communities scattered along the coast, including the popular tourist destination, a 7-acre parcel of land at Selma Park, only a 3-hour steamer trip from Vancouver. By the late 1940s, the Union Steamship Company's tourism and commercial operations began to suffer. On the tourism side, the popularity of the automobile and better road network meant that more and more people headed to highways rather than ships when they went on vacation. On the commercial side, remote communities and camps came to favor private boats or the convenience and speed of float planes for transportation. In 1951, the Sunshine Coast's reliance on the Union steamships ended almost overnight with the arrival of Blackball Ferries. Blackball Ferries expanded its service to include a popular drive-on, drive-off car ferry route between Horseshoe Bay and Nanaimo, as well as the Sunshine Coast. This innovation made travel more convenient for passengers and marked a significant shift in transportation in the region. In the summer of 1958, a strike by employees of CP steamships and the Blackball Line caused the social credit government of W.A.C. Bennett to decide that the coastal ferry service in British Columbia needed to be government-owned, and so it set out creating BC Ferry Services. Minister of Highways Phil Ghilardi was tasked with overseeing the new Crown Corporation and its rapid expansion. Their goal was to create a crossing that would shorten the crossing time between Victoria and Vancouver. The search for a mainland ferry terminal involved extensive scouting of locations, from Steveston to White Rock. Despite concerns of rough seas and bad weather, the favored site soon became the area offshore from the Tsawwassen First Nation Reserve. Construction of the terminal began in 1959, after Ghilardi selected the site, and the causeway was built from the island back towards the mainland. The endeavor used an estimated 2.3 million cubic meters of boulder, rock, and gravel. Over on the island, a small private ferry dock operated by the Gulf Island Ferry Company already existed at Swartz Bay when the choice was made to locate the BC Ferry Corporation terminal there. Operating this route effectively shortened the distance required to travel by nearly 100 kilometers had the terminals been built in Victoria Harbour and Burrard Inlet, saving hours of travel time per crossing. BC Ferry's first route between Swartz Bay and Tsawwassen began operations on June 15, 1960, using just 2 vessels, the Queen of Sydney and the Queen of Tsawwassen. The ferry system grew rapidly, taking over the Blackball Line in November 1961 and other private companies to provide vehicle ferry service between Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland. To meet rising demand, BC Ferries expanded its routes to small coastal communities and built numerous vessels, especially during its first 5 years of operation. To keep up with the increasing demand for service was BC Ferries' unique stretch and lift program, involving 7 vessels being cut in half and extended, and 5 of those same vessels later cut in half and elevated again, to increase their passenger and vehicle carrying capacities. In the mid-1980s, BC Ferries took over the operations of the saltwater branch of the BC Ministry of Transportation and Highways, which ran ferry services to very small coastal communities. This action dramatically increased the size of BC Ferries' fleet and its geographical service area. As traffic increased on the major routes, the government sought ways to divert commercial vehicle traffic away from Nanaimo Terminal in the heart of the city, thus easing traffic jams through Nanaimo city centre. Duke Point Terminal, opened on June 9, 1997, diverted truck traffic farther south of Nanaimo. The route runs from Tawasin Terminal to Duke Point, reducing commercial traffic flow through Departure Bay and Horseshoe Bay terminals. With this move, Nanaimo could focus on improving the passenger market. The improvement promised was to deliver more frequent service with reduced travel time by 30 minutes with smaller capacity ships. The Fast Ferry program, initially intended to enhance service and revitalize the local shipbuilding industry, became mired in challenges including delays, budget overruns, and technical problems. 3 vessels were constructed between 1998 and 2000, but the third vessel, though christened, was never commissioned into the BC Ferries fleet. By the time it was ready for deployment, the program had already collapsed under the mounting criticism and operational failures. Initially budgeted at $210 million, costs ballooned to over $450 million. Entering service in June of 1999, the 2 completed fast ferries were plagued by operational problems such as excessive wake and fuel inefficiency, were eventually deemed unsuitable for the route. Public outrage grew over wasted taxpayer money, and the ferries were auctioned off at a significant loss less than 4 years after their launch in March 2003 for $19.4 million, a loss of $430 million. Some claimed the aluminum ships were worth more as scrap, but no scrap dealer had put in a competitive bid. Others said an Indonesian company was prepared to pay as much as $88 million, but there was no sign of an overseas agent making a bargain basement offer to the auctioneer. The scandal damaged the provincial government's reputation, symbolizing poor planning and oversight in public infrastructure projects. Part of WAC Bennett's plan was to have ferries built in BC to create jobs and economic growth for the province. This was a win-win scenario for BC, increasing the workforce while collecting income tax on these workers, therefore reducing the overall cost. However, with the fast ferry controversy fresh in the minds of British Columbians, BC Ferries started looking at shipbuilders outside of BC to continue the modernization of the fleet. They hired American David Hahn as CEO in 2003 to lead the company during this critical period of transformation and modernization. At the time, BC Ferries was transitioning from a crown corporation to an independently managed, publicly owned company and faced significant financial and operational challenges, including aging infrastructure and a growing demand for improved services. Under Hahn's tenure, BC Ferries implemented a fleet renewal strategy, which included acquiring new vessels such as the major coastal class and northern class ferries, as well as the intermediate Salish class and island class ferries. Winning bids for the construction of these ferries came from overseas manufacturers. With their reduced labor rates and their extensive experience in building complex vessels, Germany's Flensburger SG won the contract for the 3 coastal class ferries, as well as the inside passages MV Northern Expedition, while the MV Northern Adventure was built in Greece and purchased from Tomaso's Transporto and Tourism in Italy. The 4 Salish class ferries were built by Remetoa Shipbuilding in Poland. They're powered by dual-fuel engines capable of using LNG or diesel fuel to operate. The 6 island class ferries were built by Dutch company Damen Shipyards Group in Romania. These vessels are powered by a diesel-electric hybrid system and will transition to full electric operation when shoreside electric charging stations and funding becomes available. The decision to build these ferries overseas was controversial. Critics argue that it led to missed opportunities for job creation and economic stimulation in British Columbia. Supporters, however, highlighted the financial and operational benefits of acquiring modern vessels within budget and on time. With traffic flows growing year after year and ferries operating nearly 20 hours per day, there's not much time for anything more than minor repairs. Even with their full schedules, BC Ferries do go through an intense maintenance program, conducted primarily off-season to avoid service disruptions. Passenger vessels are required by Transport Canada regulations to dry dock once in a 5-year period for refit work and safety inspections involved through maintenance of the hull, as well as underwater equipment such as propellers, shafts, and rudders. Life expectancy on a major vessel is 25 to 40 years, with over half of the vessels beyond that time, including Queen of New Westminster at over 60 years old. BC Ferries is looking to modernize its fleet. In September 2024, a press release stated BC Ferries' intentions to increase capacity and modernize its fleet by adding 7 new vessels on the major routes in 2 phases. Phase 1, with 5 ferries, will allow the retirement of its 4 oldest ships while increasing the current major fleet from 11 to 12 vessels. It's expected for the first of 5 vessels to come online by 2029, with the remaining 4 in service by 2031. And the additional 2 vessels in service by 2037. Like the previous ferries, it's expected that the contract will be awarded overseas for this next batch of ships. With a $5 billion capital plan which runs until 2034 and an operational budget of close to $1 billion per year, why wouldn't we just build a bridge connecting Vancouver Island with the mainland? While a fixed link connecting Vancouver Island to the mainland has been considered as early as the 1860s, the plan never did materialize. In more recent history, several preliminary studies of a fixed link connection were conducted during the 1980s. However, no comprehensive engineering studies have been done to confirm the feasibility of this. Several options for a fixed crossing have been analyzed, including a floating bridge, a submerged floating tunnel, a cable-stayed bridge, and a bored tunnel. The Georgia Strait offers challenges that make a fixed crossing extremely difficult. It's located in a zone of high seismic activity. The depth of the water is up to 365 meters, with deep, soft sediment up to 450 meters thick on the ocean bed. Wind speeds of up to 115 kilometers, with gusts up to 180. Waves between 4 and 7 meters, with tide fluctuation of 6 meters, and a current of 2 knots. 45,000 vessels pass through these waters each year. A floating bridge could not withstand the impact of such vessels. A bridge across the Georgia Strait would also be subject to snow, ice, and fog conditions that would make driving hazardous. Potential marine slope instabilities along the eastern side of the strait could result in underwater landslides. The cost of building a bridge or tunnel using the technologies available right now is estimated to be approximately $15 billion and an annual maintenance and rehabilitation budget of an estimated $90 million per year. With these considerations in mind, tolls on a fixed link could be up to 10 times current ferry rates. The cost of a fixed link construction project may not be affordable for the provincial government to undertake for many years to come, but as technology advances, may become a reality in the future. While there have been dozens of accidents or mishaps with the ferries, I wanted to highlight a couple of the more dramatic incidents. On August 2, 1970, the Soviet freighter Sergei Yesenin collided with the Queen of Victoria in Active Pass, slicing through the middle of the ferry days after its return to service following stretching. 3 people were killed, and damage was estimated at over $1 million. The Soviet ship did not have permission to be in Active Pass, and so the Soviet government compensated BC Ferries. On March 22, 2006, Queen of the North sank 250 kilometers south of Prince Rupert when it struck Gill Island at approximately 1 a.m. and sank. Of the 101 people on board, all but 2 were rescued. The remaining 2 are presumed to have gone down with the ship. officials determined the cause of the incident was human error by 3 BC Ferry employees neglecting their navigational duties. Operating 39 vessels on 25 routes, BC Ferries services 22 million passengers and 8 million vehicles per year and is the largest ferry operation in North America and the second largest in the world after the Istanbul ferry network in Turkey. BC Ferries remains a vital lifeline for the coastal communities of British Columbia, bridging the islands and the mainland with efficient transportation services. Over the years, the company has evolved to meet growing demands, overcome operational challenges, and embrace modernization through fleet upgrades and environmental initiatives. While its decision of building vessels overseas has not been without controversy, it underscores the complexities of balancing financial stability, public accountability, and service excellence.